In this video, you are going to learn about indexing variables. I will introduce the concept of indexing, what it means, and I will show you how to index variables, in particular vectors and matrices, and you'll also get to see how to integrate two concepts that you've already learned. Indexing, well, that you will have learned by the time I talk about it, and the colon operator. So here we are in Matlab. And by the way, I'm going to be using some variables here in this video that I created in the previous video. So if you were trying to run some of the code here and you get some error messages, then you need to recreate these variables, in particular this variable vec, from the previous video. Okay, so let me set up the problem first. The problem is we have this vector, vec, and it has three elements in here. Now, what if we only need to access one of these elements? Let's say we just want the second element. Now, okay, for a three-element vector like this, it's pretty simple. You can just say element number 2, or you can point to it or circle it like this. But you can imagine we need a scalable method to be able to access any arbitrary number and location of elements inside a vector and a matrix. And that is done using parentheses. So here we have our variable, it's a vector, and then in parentheses, you input which element you want to access. So this is the first element, the second element, and the third element. So if we write vec parenthesis 2, the answer, the output, is going to be 4. And the reason why 4 is the correct answer is that this is the first element. In fact, so I can do this. So here we access the first element. The second element we already saw. Here is the third element is 3, right? Remember, the vector was 1, 4, 3. And now, watch what happens if we try to access the fourth element. Matlab gives us an error message. It says index exceeds, so index, that's this thing, exceeds the number of array elements. So there are 3 elements in this variable, and we are trying to access the fourth element. So this is indexing. Now let's see what happens if we try to index the 0.4th element. Now you should already know that something is wrong here because it's not possible to access, there is no such thing as the 0.4th element. We have the first element and the second element. Matlab gives us this error message. Array indices must be positive integers or logical values. I'm going to talk more about logical values later, so you don't have to worry about this for now. But positive integers. So we can also test that if we try let's try minus 2, then it's also sensible that we get an error message because there is no minus 2 element. The elements, we start counting at 1. All right, so this is for accessing only one number, but what if you wanted to access multiple numbers within a vector? So for example, let's say you want to output the first 2 elements, so elements 1 and 2. Well, there's actually 2 ways that you can access multiple elements from a vector. One way is to do it using the colon operator, and that's you've already learned before. So we want elements 1 through 2, so I type 1 colon 2. Okay, and that gives me 1, 4. And if we want elements 1 and 3, how would you do that using the colon operator? How could you access elements 1 and 3 and ignore element 2? Well, I hope you paused the video, or now you can pause the video and work through it. What we need to do is say, so we want indices 1 and 3, so we can do that by saying 1 skip 2 skip 3 and then put that inside vec. So the answer is 1, 3. Now it's actually a little bit confusing. Maybe I'll create a new vector. Let's call this vec b. And that equals, let's go 9, 6, and 2. I just want to show you, because the indices in this case happen to be exactly the same as the elements, the numbers in the vector. That was not intended. Okay, so now I'm going to write vec b, 1 skip 2 skip 3, and now the answer that we get is 9, 2, because this is the first element and the third element, and that's what we input here. So now, out of curiosity, I'm a huge fan of letting your curiosity drive your explorations in coding. You can always just try things. Let's see what happens if we try going 1 skip 0.5 skip 2. Now we should expect to get an error message here because this expression inside the parentheses here is 1, 1.5, 2, and there is no 1.5th element. There's no 1.5th index into a vector. And what's interesting is that Matlab doesn't give us an error message. It gives us a warning message. Errors are different from warnings. I will explain that in more detail later in the course. But an error means there's something really horribly wrong. You have to fix it. You've done something wrong. A warning message in Matlab doesn't mean that you've necessarily done something wrong. It means that Matlab thinks you might be doing something wrong, and it's giving you a warning about it. So here it says, integer operands are required for the colon operator when used as an index. And in fact, you can see what Matlab has done is return 966, which is actually the first element, and then the second element, and then again the second element. Now it turns out that this behavior is Matlab version dependent. So if you're using an older version of Matlab, it's possible that this actually gave you an error message and not a warning. Now, in my opinion, this actually should be an error. I don't think that Matlab should allow this kind of behavior, but it does, and so we have to know about it and be sensitive to this. Okay, but so why did we get 966? Why was this second element repeated? So that actually leads to introducing the second way to access multiple elements from a vector. So a few moments ago, I said there are two ways to access multiple elements: the colon operator, which I just showed you, and then the second way is using square brackets to concatenate, and here you just list off the elements that you are looking for. So what this code here is saying is that we want to access from vector vec the first element, third element, second element, first element, and so on. So let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to copy and paste this into the command window. And now, okay, this is still, I'm going to do this with vec b instead. So the answer that we get here, and let me also dump out vec b again. So here's the original vector, and these are the indices that we requested. So we get 1, 1, so 9, 9, because those are both the first element, and then 3, 2, so then that's the third element was 2. The second element, which is here, so the second element is 6, that's printing out here. And then again, it's a 9 because it's 1, and then 2, and I hope you see how this works. Essentially, Matlab is returning the first element, the third element, and so on. And this is pretty neat because the result is actually much longer than the original vector. So the original vector only has 3 elements, but this result actually has 8 elements in total. And that's essentially what happens when we do the colon operator skipping by 0.5. So the way that Matlab is interpreting this expression as an index into the variable vec is it's rounding up. So in fact, Matlab interpreted this as 1, 2, 2. So it was rounding up 0.5 to be 2. And that's why we got 966, because these are both coming from the second element. All right, so that's for accessing vectors. We can also access individual parts of matrices, and that gets a little bit more confusing. So there's another layer of complexity that you need to worry about here. So this variable, I'm going to type who's a mat to remind us the size of this variable. This is a 3 by 3 matrix, so 3 rows, 3 columns. It looks like this. And what I'm doing here is accessing on the first dimension element number 1, and on the second dimension, these dimensions are being demarcated by a comma, elements 2 and 3. So this is going to give me the first row, columns 2 and 3. So let's try this. So copy and paste. And here we see the answer is 2, 3, and that corresponds to the first row here, and then a comma, and then columns 2 and 3. So if you wanted to get out the numbers 3, 5 from this matrix, what would you have to type in here? How would you have to index amat, this variable amat, in order to return or to access these two elements here? Well, I'm sure you guessed it. Let's see, let's work our way through it. So we want the third row. So this is row 3, and then we want columns 1, 2. So we can use a colon operator like I did here, or you can also use concatenation with square brackets like this. So there you go, 3, 5. So the third row and columns 1 and 2. Okay, and that's also what I show here. And of course, we can combine this. So I can say, let's say we want the first row and the third row and columns 1 and 2. That's going to give me a sub-matrix. And let me show this full matrix again, so it's crystal clear where this is coming from. So rows 1 and 3, so that's rows 1 and 3, and then columns 1 and 2. So this is column 1 and column 2. So we are getting a submatrix that comes from row 1, column 1 and 2, and then row 3, column 1 and 3. Okay, so the best way, the foolproof way to access individual parts of a matrix is by using a comma to separate the different dimensions. So this is the first dimension and the second dimension, in other words, the row and the column. Now you can also have multi-dimensional matrices, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video. I want to show you something else. There's something called linear indexing. Notice I don't have any commas in here. I'm just listing numbers. In fact, so just the numbers 4:5. Now, you might think that this is a weird and possibly could be incorrect way to access this matrix, because we know that this matrix is 3 by 3. It has 3 rows and 3 columns. So there's no row and there's no column that has a 4th and a 5th element. So this does look a little bit weird. Let's see whether this gives us an error message. Turns out it doesn't give us an error message because this is perfectly legal behavior. This is called linear indexing. And so what Matlab can do is represent this matrix both using two-dimensional coordinates, so row and column, and also using one-dimensional indices. And the way that works is going down the first column and then to the next column. So this is element 1, element 2, element 3. This is actually element 4. This is the 4th index into the matrix. This is element 5, and that's why you see 2, 8 here. So then this would be 6, 7, 8, 9. So we can type amat and then in parentheses 8, the number 8, and that's going to give us this number here because it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So amat and then 8, and we get the number 7. Okay, so you can see that linear indexing can get a little bit confusing. I recommend against using linear indexing until you are more comfortable working with Matlab indexing and multidimensional matrices. So in this video, I introduced you to the idea of indexing, which refers to accessing specific elements or ranges of elements within a vector or a matrix. In the next video, I'm going to start talking about a different kind of variable, and that is variables for strings. See you soon.